From William Stickevers, Strategic Astrological Advisor.
So one of the countries that are in even more economic dire trouble in the U.S. happens to be Russia. We see Russia here, the 1991 horoscope. We see this Moon, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction happening right on the Russian midheaven. And the midheaven happens to be the government, like the executive branch, but mainly the government of Russia. And Russia also happens to have transiting Pluto right on its natal Saturn. And the Uranus-Pluto midpoint will be hitting its midheaven directly as well. So the prospects of a political breakdown in Russia could be a likely consequence of the economic breakdown that's already in progress. And there's a number of key indicators for a potential political breakdown. Astrologically, we see it, but we're also seeing it directly with Putin's authoritarian psychology, where the economic model in Russia is essentially an extension of his personal power, which means economic failure is likely to undermine political legitimacy. So Russia right now cannot fund itself through normal debt markets or through taxation due to collapsing productivity, a state that can lead to governmental insolvency or loss of control. This is clearly what the chart, the mundane horoscope, is showing me. You know, sort of like the czar-like persona. Look at that Saturn Neptune, right? That Napoleonic or czar-like persona of Putin suggests the entire regime is brittle and built on perception or applied perception management. And once the economic reality catches up, which it's doing now, it will shatter that illusion, and political stability in Russia will be in grave danger. So there's a number of implications that I'm saying. Now, when we look at, before I go into that, let's just look at the Russian black box. This is a black box that implies that Russia's coming political upheaval and economic unraveling is in progress, or Russia is headed for a breakdown due to systemic flaws rooted in authoritarianism and central control. So what do we note here? A number of things. So there's massive public dissatisfaction. There's a loss of elite and oligarchical support. There's a breakdown in regional governments happening now in Russia. Protests, strikes, or even possible coup attempts, right? And increased repression followed by potential systemic fractures. So Russia is headed for a breakdown due to systemic flaws rooted in authoritarianism by the Putin regime. Russia's war chest is depleted. Consumers face negative disposable income due to low wage and high cost. The average Russian income is $618 a month, with basic living expenses exceeding that. Cannibalization of the internal economy is already underway. So there's four potential scenarios. There's the four potential scenarios to any type of economic breakdown in general. So the gradual breakdown and decay based on old school Keynesian theory, that would be a 70% probability. Deep recession based on the Stockholm School theory, that would be more likely an 80% probability. Financial crisis based on the Austrian disequilibrium theory, that would be a 50% probability. And then total meltdown, like we saw back in 1989 with the Soviet Union, based on Milton Friedman's quantity theory of money, that'd be about a 25% probability. So when we look at this all, you know, we could say we're seeing a gradual breakdown and decay that will likely result in a deep depression, that will likely result in a major upheaval on the political level. So we could see right now we have the Russian government cannibalizing its economy to survive, which really suggests desperation. So in authoritarian regimes like we see now with Putin, and when economic support disintegrates, public unrest or elite, when I talk about elite, I'm talking about people at the very elite, that fragmentation often follows. So we're going to have fragmentation. Will this ensure the fall of Putin? I don't know. He is a survivor, right? He's very cunning. However, I think he's 71 years of age, and his health is an issue, right? His sustainability as this, running Russia like a mob boss is now in question, or will be in question this year. And that's partly, by the way, in Ukraine. We look at the Ukraine horoscope, we see the world point. First of all, we see Pluto also right on Ukraine's Saturn, and that would certainly imply the structural devastation and loss unrecoverable losses, along with losing, Eastern Europe to Russia, right? So you could see this sort of breakdown occurring in the country. And then when you factor in and exacerbate it with the Saturn-Neptune on the world point, it doesn't make a direct tight hit, but you do see it is squaring off that Uranus-Neptune conjunction on the ascendant, and it's in outer sign opposition to Mars. When we look at the black box, it looks not that much different from what we see with Russia, right? We see a very, very negative black box. And this certainly would indicate that Ukraine is likely to continue to lose ground, literally with the Russians in the field, and continue to incur more losses. And also risk losing complete 100% support from the United States. In fact, Ukrainian President Zelensky told European journalists, interestingly enough, that Putin will die soon. Now, it's interesting, right? Because when we had Saturn-Neptune conjunction back in 1953, we had Stalin. Stalin died 1953, right within days of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So we have Saturn-Neptune conjunction, along with the moon, happening right on the midheaven. So it's interesting that Zelensky is saying Putin will die. He's predicting that, and he said this just the other day, that Putin will die soon in his assessment discussing the war in Ukraine, stating that intelligence sources that he got from both the United States and Ukrainian intelligence sources that have penetrated the Kremlin states that he will die soon, and that's a fact. That's his quote, and that's a fact. And it will come to an end. Now, that would certainly be an irresponsible thing to say, right? Putin has been experiencing health problems, as we know, for a long time. But if Putin did die, the Russians will remember what Zelensky said. And at that point, it would be exceedingly difficult to convince the Russians that nothing nefarious was going on. And getting both sides to agree to any sort of peace deal or ceasefire would almost certainly become impossible. So this is what's happening. So when I look at this, it's like, is it likely we're going to see a peace deal? It's possible, but we're going to see a lot more drama play out. And this is certainly taking place now. We're seeing things going from bad to worse. Just when they're on the verge of a peace deal, Zelensky backs off. Putin demands that Zelensky step down, or he will only talk to a newly elected Ukrainian president. He will not talk to Zelensky for numerous reasons. So now, Trump said today he's very angry and pissed off at Putin. And one of the big arguments is, why should Russia's refusal to make big concessions come to any surprise to either the White House or mainstream media, given Russian forces are clearly steadily gaining on the battlefield? So this is where Trump said, if Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault for that not happening, which might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I'm going to put major tariffs on oil and all oil coming out of Russia. So again, this is where we're in the realm of uncertainty. It's almost impossible to predict what's likely to happen here. However, Trump went on to say, although he's angry and pissed off, he also stated that Putin's comments on Zelensky are not going in the right location. And that was in reference to a plan pitched by Putin for a transitional administration, right? So in other words, Ukraine under the auspices of the UN, all of this, right? Basically, they want to shift the regime. They want to move away from the Zelensky regime. Once that has been achieved and they have new leadership, Russians will agree to have the United States arbiter and moderate a peace deal or a negotiation of a peace agreement with the new authorities. So that is likely to play out. So what I'm getting at here is that I don't think, based on this chart, we may see the collapse of the Zelensky regime, and that will be followed by the collapse of the Putin regime. It's certainly possible, or disintegration, a political disintegration of the current Russian regime. Both happening simultaneously.
For nearly 4 decades, William Stickevers has empowered business leaders, independent thinkers, and visionaries to navigate global shifts and critical turning points with clarity and confidence. His unique blend of advanced astrological techniques, macroeconomic insights, and strategic forecasting equips clients to stay ahead of the curve and thrive in uncertain times. Discover how William's in-depth forecasts, programs, and astrological consultations can help you make more confident, well-timed decisions and recognize opportunities others overlook. Visit williamstickevers.com for your strategic advantage in business, finances, and life.